On today's episode of Gathering the Kings,
there's just this pivot that's more so I'm comfortable in where I'm at. So now I want to turn my attention to others, right? And what can I do to help them have a journey that's similar or even better? So I think, that also is huge too.
You are listening to Gathering the Kings with Chaz Wolfe, featuring fellow 7, 8, and even 9-figure business owners who have real battle scars from business and life, but have prevailed as the king that they are designed to be. We welcome high-performing entrepreneurs to the stage in order to reveal the real of the real on what it takes to build a successful business today. We dissect the good and bad decisions they've made along the way that give a true and accurate picture of the journey of success and how you too can get there. Through this dialogue, you will learn the value of growing your network and surrounding yourself with power players and kings like today's guest. Grab your pen and notebook because we're about to dive in.
What's up, everybody? I'm Chaz Wolfe. I'm your host, Gathering the Kings podcast. Today, I've got Allison Brecklin here on the Kings stage. Allison, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's lovely to be here.
You know, I was just off stage or offline here telling you your last name was on my little girl baby name list. My wife, you know, she had some other names that she liked, but Brecklin, I still love that name. So here you are with the last name. I don't know. Maybe it's meant to be they're supposed to be here.
Yeah. You've got a Brecklin in one way or another.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. See, now you're in my swirl. We can check that off the box because I think after 4, my wife, she's
done and done, you know.
She said almost that exact same phrase, done and done. Allison, I want to know, what kind of business do you have?
Sure. So I'm currently the VP of Client Operations for Mixhalo. Mixhalo is an augmented audio platform powered by proprietary technology that provides an elevated experience at live events. So for example, at music events, it unlocks the same soundboard mix that musicians get on stage, oftentimes including multiple mixes. So guitars, vocals, drums, customizable for every fan. From a live sports perspective, teams and venues use Mixhalo to deliver channels of audio content, which could include like home and away broadcasts, Spanish language broadcasts, celebrity commentary, and any other custom content essentially they want to do. And it's all perfectly synchronized with the live action.
Wow.
So we're doing a number of things. I would love to take credit for it, but I work with some really, really intelligent people who've developed all this. So it's kind of really amazing, and I'm fortunate to be a part of it.
Yeah, that's really cool that, and we kind of talked about this before we hit the recording button, but just to kind of catch the listeners up to speed, you know, you were like, you know, so I part of a leadership team. It's not just me. I'm not this, solo entrepreneur. But there's a dynamic to partnership that we're going to talk about here. And even you being maybe more on the operations, maybe integrator facing perspective, I think that, what did I say? I said that you're probably the answer to a lot of the entrepreneurs out there. So I think that we'll try to provide even more value to these all over the place entrepreneurs that need incredibly talented people like you in partnership with them. So let's go down that road. But I want to know before we do that.
Yeah.
What makes you tick? Why are you doing this? What's the bigger picture? Is it tied to the industry? Is it tied to audio? Is it tied to something bigger for you? Like, we'll get you up in the morning.
Yeah, good question. I do think live events has, tugged at my heart and brain for a long time. It's something I really enjoy. And so it keeps drawing me back there.
Yeah.
I think it's also a mix of needing to lead by example and continue sort of that path, as well as mixed in a bit of competitiveness. I want to be able to set a positive example for not just leadership, but as female leadership as well, while also, proving anyone who ever counted me out wrong. And, obviously the feeling of accomplishment is a huge motivator. I'm not sure, when you kill a meeting or you kill a project and you're like, wow, I did that. I did a really great job and it turned out as expected or better. I'm not sure there's, much better natural feeling in the world. Right. So it's probably a combination or mix of those things.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's funny how you've slow played the, I'm just part of the team play here, but everything that you just said is what winners think about, right? And
Sure.
and as business owners, this is a game, right?
Yeah.
This is a game, and it's sometimes it's project by project, like you said, quarter by quarter.
Yeah,
Sometimes
absolutely.
it's the individual deal, or sometimes it's a new product, right? But man, when you crush something, when you win,
Yeah.
right? That feeling, actually, it's funny because I have on one of our products, we have a bookmark, and it says something about, I'm looking for it here. It says there are wins everywhere. It's up to you to seek them repeatedly. This is not motivation. You must win constantly.
Yeah.
And I go on to talk about it. Basically, it's up to you. I mean, your family, your time, your freedom, like it's all at stake. You got to freaking win every single day. So do you feel like in your role that like you're given opportunities to solve problems and win? Or is it like this, like you got to create your own problems and solve them? Like, what's it like on the inside?
Yeah, the opportunities seem to just arise throughout my career, right?
Yeah.
That's probably why I'm still doing what I'm doing, is because I've been able to solve problems, right? That's a lot of what my day entails. I often say every day is different for me, and I'm working on, any number of different projects, whether it's with a major sports team or a large conference or music artists. Any number of things can arise that I need to address or plan for, or have a plan,
Right.
A, B, or C. So those definitely arise naturally, I would say, just sort
Sure.
of given where I am. And I think being in operations, obviously, right? There's just so many opportunities. So yeah,
Makes sense.
bring them on.
Okay. Well, let's dive into some of those problems. But before, let's just talk about your journey. How did you
Sure.
get involved with maybe this specific project? Was entrepreneurialism, or even, the idea of bigger thinking and business
Yeah.
part of your journey beforehand? Give us the story.
Sure. I mean, if you want to go all the way back, I think I probably, dabbled in entrepreneurism, if you will, entrepreneurship, I should say, way back in the day, back in my teens when my mom taught me how to flip furniture. And I, tried to start a pop culture newsletter, which is probably a stretch. I think my English teacher referred to it as a gossip rag, and like we actually
you title that however you want to. They're
exactly.
going to roll with it.
we printed it, so by the time you actually printed it, like the gossip wasn't actually hot
maybe
anymore.
as hot anymore.
Yeah,
that's all right.
and I think we charged a whopping 50 cents for it. So by the time my poor parents paid for the paper and ink, it was a losing venture. Perhaps also my first lesson in cash flow, So big pivot from there to the operator, So then fast forward, I, obviously sort of went the traditional route of school and, figuring out what I was, I guess, good at, right? And worked for a number of companies, including like Hertz and Pandora and Ticketfly and Eventbrite. And so working for Hertz, I would say, really gave me sort of that basic business education, if you will. You can, your basics, right? And that was great, but it wasn't necessarily my passion, wasn't cars, if you will. And so at some point I was like, well, I need to pivot, and found Ticketfly, which was an amazing experience. And I just really found sort of the perfect spot of being an operator and being able to, get stuff done, and also being in an industry that is exciting and interesting and always evolving. So then the Mixhalo opportunity came about, and it was even more of an opportunity for me to put, I guess, my spin on things or my touch on things, helping a really great team get even better, hopefully. So that's how I got here.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously it's not the, as we talked about, maybe the traditional business owner route. You went more of the traditional, go to school, get a position type thing, but you still found yourself in a place where what you just said, I should, point this out to the listener, because you said it, you had this incredible opportunity. You had nothing bad to say about the place that you just came from.
Yeah.
But you still felt a tug. And the difference that you made clear to us was that there was this creative outlet for you, or this, like, I get to be part of maybe a larger decision-making platform.
Yeah.
Which is what we desire as business owners, is control. It's, I want to curate an environment that makes sense for me, for my family, for my team. It's impact, it's influence, right?
Yeah, exactly. You nailed it. So I think that the draw to that, whether you're an entrepreneur or in a position such as myself, is it doesn't necessarily have to be at the biggest, scale or grandest position. I think whether you're in my position or even if you're starting out, right? Like, you can find those opportunities where you can not only put your sort of stamp on it, but it also helps you grow, right? I'm doing things that I've never done before. And while it can be, painful almost and messy sometimes, when you're done with it, it's that same sense of accomplishment, right? It's like, I won, I challenged myself, and you just get better. And so I think there's just that tugs at you and keeps you moving forward.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, you're giving us all the same language, that we as entrepreneurs use. It's because there's a desire here for influence, for something greater. I have this phrase that I like to use, this grateful but not done. Like, you've totally embodied that.
Yes, exactly. And I
thankful
think
for where I'm coming, but we're still going.
Yeah. And I think, I think we touched on it a little bit earlier, but I think there is also, at a certain point in your career, right, it's what keeps you disciplined or motivated, right? I think initially you're just trying to sort of move up and figure out, like, where am I going? And then at some point, there's just this pivot that's more so, I'm comfortable in where I'm at. So now I want to turn my attention to others, right? And what can I do to help them have a journey that's similar or even better? So I think, that also is huge too.
Yeah, that's the king mindset. It's, the difference between the warrior and the king we talk about, the warriors in the battle, right?
Yeah.
A little bit selfishly motivated, but they have to be, right? Whether you're building a business or climbing the ladder, you have to take that approach. But at some point it has to become bigger.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's a little bit empty. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. What's the point? Right. So it's kind of like, I don't know. So yeah.
Let's get into some tacticals here. You've got a totally different perspective here that I want to be able to pull on some levers here for the listeners.
Let's do it.
Good and bad decision we want to go to first. I'm going to ask you two different layers on this. I'm going to ask you about the good and bad decision, but I'm also going to ask you from that perspective of the operator, how that interaction with the entrepreneur in that scenario maybe went or could have went or did went. So that way the listener can take that piece of it away also.
Sure.
Cool. So what was a good decision that maybe you made or the company made, and that we're going to talk about here, that you look back and you're like, ooh, this one thing that we did, boom. It's led to some of our greatest successes.
Sure. Thankfully there's been a number of good decisions, more good than bad. I think, sort of playing along with this, I guess unpopular decisions have been my good decisions, especially when it comes to that relationship with entrepreneurs or, CEOs, co-founders, what have you. And I think that decision ultimately sometimes is saying no, right? And so I would like to say that my ultimate goal is to say yes. If you come to me and ask me if we can do something, I will try my best and my hardest to make that happen. That is my ultimate goal. But there are times where no needs to be the answer. And so, in looking at whether it's, I think the best example of this is whether to sort of re-sign a client, right? Or maybe even sign a new client, looking at, is it the right fit? What's the cost? How is this going to affect our team? Is this part of the larger goal? Sometimes those answers don't add up to a yes, right? And you have to take the unpopular sort of position of like, hey, I'm not sure we should do this. And then obviously provide the data and backup. And, in my case, you've hopefully developed the trust of folks
Yep.
to say, like, you know, she doesn't say no just to say no. And so I think that's probably, and I can remember several times, right, where this has happened, and ultimately we were better off for it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't change the decision at all, and I know the folks that I've worked with wouldn't either.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably, you know, sort of the best decision. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I will always promote sort of process and standardization where ambiguity exists. There's so much ambiguity in what people do, especially when, you know, you're the size of, whether it's, you know, your company, my company. When you're so small, oftentimes process doesn't exist, and it doesn't need to be the perfect process, but you have to start somewhere. And so I think reducing as much ambiguity is one of the best decisions you can make. And it's not easy, right? And it's oftentimes not popular either. It's like, well, what's wrong with the way we're doing it? And so, yeah, I would say probably my best decisions, other than mentorship and teaching, have been involved in sort of maybe what's not the most popular decisions. Yeah.
100%. Okay. So you just backed up a dump truck. I don't know if you realize what just happened. I don't know if the listener realizes what just happened.
You are welcome.
Yeah. Okay. So let's dissect some of this. Okay. So first off, I heard you say that you built a history of two things. Mm-hmm. Number one, execution, because that's what builds trust, right? Yeah. Like I give it to you.
Yeah.
And I can know that you're going to go execute. Therefore, I value not only just your ability to execute, but also now your opinion, because you've proven yourself.
Yes.
So there has to be a history of that. And then on top of that, you provided a history of mostly yeses, right? So let's just be honest. Us entrepreneurs or co-founders, all these names that we give ourselves, right? We got a little bit of an ego. We kind of like to be the guy. We kind of like to be the girl. We kind of like to be the one with all the bright ideas.
Exactly.
Oftentimes we are the guy with the bright ideas. Okay, fine. Yes. And so there's a little bit of like strategicness in here. I heard you say by mostly trying to say yes, like I'm not being negative. Correct. I'm not necessarily being just like a no fun zone, right? Because that's immediately what a high performing visionary thinks of is like, well, every time I come to you, you're just a box of no's, you know,
Debbie Downer, you know, nobody wants to be the Debbie Downer.
Exactly. So I heard you say you came into an agreement often, and then you pressed yourself to see if we can make those things happen.
Exactly.
But you also have the ability, the confidence, the assertiveness to be able to say, hey, bud, I hear you, but not on this one. But here's also then the data, the logic, the business case on why not. Because oftentimes we visionaries, we're very conceptual and we kind of run with the gut feeling and we're all excited and we come to you high logic, data driven, maybe a little bit more prone to the no, but you've learned how to say yes and figure it out, which then makes this agreement work. So that way, when you do say no, I'm like, whoa. I'm listening.
Something's awry. Yes, exactly.
The listener right now who is, let's say maybe they're that visionary, they're building their company. Maybe it's a small company. They're not 7 figures yet, or maybe they're 5, 10, 20 million. I don't know. But they haven't found this person, or maybe they think they have this person. What do they need to do to curate that relationship that we just got done describing that you've done so well with?
Ooh, good question. I think it's, you know, for me, I've been fortunate to have the folks that I've worked with in that type of a relationship, I guess, you know, give me enough rope, if you will. And as the term goes, you know, and has allowed essentially me to be able to exhibit that what they hired me for, I can do. And until I prove them wrong, essentially, or do something that does not live up to the expectations, we've been able to move forward sort of with that, you know, understanding and partnership. And so I think, you know, you hire people for a reason, especially, you know, in the position I have. And so I think you have to be able to, and then it's really hard, right? You have to be able to let go. And this is very personal for some folks, right? And entrepreneurs, these are like their children or, you know, their babies. And so it's really hard to trust other people, I think, with such, you know, important things. And so, you have to give a little bit on both sides. And if, you've made the wrong hire or you don't trust this person, then that needs to be corrected. But I think, find your operator.
Yeah, exactly. Do you see successful entrepreneurs out there, especially in, tech or, any of the companies that we know that are, 50 million or more? Like, do you see those guys without operators?
No, absolutely not.
It's a silly thought to think of, right?
Yeah. It's exactly.
Why
what
do you
just
think
said.
so many smaller guys then try to do it on their own?
I think a lot of it plays into what you said before, right? There is a bit of an ego. I think initially you kind of think you can sort of do it all, and you have to have a bit of an ego and you have to believe that somewhat. But at some point, and whether it's size or revenue, you get to that point where there's not one person that can handle it all, right? Very few businesses survive that way. And so, I think that's really it.
Yeah, it's should be a heavy truth, right? So like, I hope that we just laid some pretty thick airing down on the listener, because oftentimes we play small, not because we don't want to play big. It's just that the ingredients to play big are different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, especially when companies are really small, you also have to find people who are willing to wear all the hats, right? And so it's not when you find that person that can share sort of the vision, right? Like for me, if I share your vision, like I'm willing to do essentially what you're willing to do to make this work, right? And so I just think, that's also part of sort of your job as the entrepreneur is like, sell me on the vision. Why should I love this or, be so devoted to this as you are?
Yeah. Well, part of that is the communication and vision. And then the other part of it is the rope. It's like, well, how can I expect you to be devoted and love it if I'm holding all of it?
Yeah.
A little difficult to be able to do that. Okay. So what about a bad choice that you've made or the team's made that we're like, oh, we don't want to ever do this again?
Yeah. I think honestly, my biggest one is really just not, and thankfully it hasn't happened, I would say more than a couple times, but making a bad hire and making that bad hire because the workload was so high. Like that's what was driving it. And, thinking, oh, this person's not the perfect fit, but the team is so overloaded. I just need to get someone in here and I'll teach them, I can do this. And it's not the route to go. It ultimately and did cost me more time and obviously money in the long run because they weren't the right fit, right? Not only did they not reduce the workload as expected, but they weren't quite the right fit. And I think the team obviously recognized that as well, which, causes a swirl and not a positive way, if you will. And so, hopefully never again. I think I've learned my lesson, but it's even if, in the short term, you have to pick up, more of the workload yourself or, make a deal with someone on the team, whatever it is, it's just not worth trying to fit, that square peg in the round hole. It just isn't.
It's not. Yeah, you're 100% right. What do you guys do on the front end to try to minimize that? Are there any hiring tactics that you use that you can share?
Yeah, I think, sort of the biggest one is just writing an appropriate JD, right? The job description has to fit. Like, and it doesn't, you see some of these job descriptions that are, 2 pages long and they're frou-frou and have all these wonderful and obscure things in them. And then it doesn't actually represent the reality of what you're looking for, right? And so I think that's the first step is writing an appropriate JD. And I think that should be a collaborative process also. Get other people to look at it, especially if you have people in that position, right? Like, is this representative of what you're doing? And I think being open, right? Being open to different backgrounds. I think at least when I, was coming up, it was that traditional route. It was kind of, repeated ad nauseum. You need to go to school, you need to get a degree, and these are the things you have to do in order to move forward. And I don't, especially now, that's not the case. Yeah. And so I think it's being open to different experiences and what different people bring to the table, and definitely not, having sort of a bias to what's traditional or, what you've seen in the past.
Yeah, I think that's a great, I think an entrepreneur is going to be just a little bit more flexible, maybe in the way that they think anyway. Yeah. Which they're probably going to agree with that, that they probably didn't go to school. I know I'm not a college educated person. So, but at the same time, it still does hold a little bit of clout, especially when you're talking about maybe hiring an operator, or even trying to find a co-founder. Like there's some of those things that hold that weight. Absolutely. And what I hear you saying is that there's experiences that hold as much, if not maybe more weight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Experiences in other businesses, experiences in life and family. What would you say?
Yeah, I would say all of it, right? You can take, or I guess you can gain knowledge out of many experiences. Oftentimes those are personal, right? Mm-hmm. And, I'm also not saying that school, isn't a good path. I think, especially for some occupations, right? You don't really want a doctor not going to school, right?
I was YouTube educated. I'm ready to do surgery on your knee.
Scalpel. Yeah. So
maybe one day.
Maybe. So I think that, sorry, now I'm just thinking about you doing surgery after, with a YouTube channel, and I got
tutorial.
I got distracted by that visual. But yeah, so I think all of those experiences play in, right? And so I also look at other things, right? Like, how long were you in your positions, right? I think that can tell a story. If you're only there for, a few short months and you hop and hop and hop, it may not be the most negative story, but I want to know more about it, right? And so I think it's being open to hearing what happened with those positions, or conversely, if you were somewhere for 15 years, what kept you there? Why are you leaving now? And so, I think any number of experiences can prove to be valuable.
Yeah. As you've said, I'll point it out for the listener here. You just have to get good in the interview process of figuring out what that story is, what they've learned in the story, how it's applicable, and then being able to make a good decision on that. I think that you're right. We're never going to make perfect hiring decisions. You're going to, unfortunately, probably make one this year, and so will I. Probably, I'm gonna try to minimize that completely. But I think that the variable there is that we're people. Yeah. But the variable there is that we're people, and that's incredible. There's some incredible people out there.
Yeah, there are.
Be a game changer for your business.
Yeah, absolutely true.
All right, we're going to switch over here to the speed round. I want to come at you with operations questions for the operator.
Okay.
It's a KPI question. I like to say it like this: if you could only track one thing, Allison, what would it be? And you can only pick this one forever and ever. What would it be?
Forever and ever. It would be a hard toss up. I know you're already going to be like, no, only one. I'll let you call it. No, I think it's churn or employee retention, right? And they're, I think, both indicative of very similar things. Yeah. Yes, exactly. And so someone once said, or I heard, right, either one can be like a leaky bucket, which I think is a really good analogy, right? So you can throw all the money you want at this, leaky bucket, if you will. You can pay a large signing bonus to sign a client. You can pay, a candidate top dollar. But unless you have what they need to stick around, it doesn't matter. Yeah, that bucket's still going to leak. And so I think, depending on obviously where you're, what type of company, where you're at, what you do, like one of either of those is huge. So
yeah, it's the experience, whether it be the client experience and or even the employment experience, the team experience, the culture. Mm-hmm. But you're 100% right. I remember as you're saying this, I worked for a company, years ago, and for a pretty big name. But I'm like super high logic, task oriented, big vision, but yet integrator style. Like I kind of have a little bit of both. So it's like I don't really get in the feels of a whole bunch.
Yeah.
So I'm not the employee that needs to do the culture thing.
Sure.
However, it was funny. I was in an environment that was like negative, like below zero. And it was all about just go,
Yeah.
and the churn client wise or employee wise was no concern of anybody.
Right.
And that's just, and it's almost like I don't want to say like that's a bad model. It just wasn't the model for me, because it's clearly working for certain businesses. They just have to have a certain amount of energy around filling the pipeline on both of those things. And what I learned about it was, it's not that I needed like the feels of that I wanted to be part of something. I just wanted to be seen as a human.
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't really need anything special. I didn't really need to sing Kumbaya, like none of that.
No, don't need to
I just
sit
needed
around,
you to like actually see me in the eyeballs, you know?
Absolutely. I hear you 100%. Right. And so it's funny because culture, I think, is huge, and it's thrown around so much that I think people get annoyed by it. Right. They're like, oh, culture, great, you're building that. But culture is huge in a company, and it really dictates a lot, I think, of how things transpire, whether that's from client churn or employee retention.
Yeah, both. It's funny how you said that. Both are equally attached to the same either person or belief system, maybe core values even. And again, not that the other is wrong. I think we just share a belief together here of that. If there's not as much work actually that has to be done, there's work. Don't get me wrong. It's a different type of work. It's a little bit more of an intentional work, where the other is just a little bit more transactional, a little bit higher volume, a little bit more transactional, where I think people like you and me just go, hey, look, if we just plug the hole, you fill the boat, there's going to be another hole that pops up, I'm sure. Or maybe this hole becomes leaky again and we got to reseal it, but like, it's not the same gaping hole.
Right.
Over and over and over again.
Exactly. You've nailed it.
Good. All right. What resource or maybe book would you recommend for business owners trying to grow in 23?
Yeah. So one of my favorites, and I think obviously this last question sort of led into that, is The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. And so I think it really does sort of break down how you can develop a positive culture that does promote teamwork, cooperation, and most importantly to me, like consistency, right? Because like, cool if you do things a couple of times, but like without consistency, again, it doesn't matter, right? And so it essentially explores the concepts of like, they talk about these three, sort of elements, and it's safety, sharing vulnerability, and then establishing sort of purpose, and how these three things essentially lead to that cooperation and shared goals. And so, again, I said it earlier, I think culture gets thrown around a lot, and sort of this authenticity conversation comes about, but I think the two are very closely related. And being able to be vulnerable and approach people like, I don't know everything, I really don't, but I can learn, and let's be vulnerable together. This is a safe place for us to move forward. The egos are left at the door. I mean, at least when it comes to, like this particular project, what have you, it's not about, who's getting promoted here. Like, let's get this done and move forward, and how we all benefit from that. And so I just think it's huge. I just had actually I met up with a previous coworker last week, and we were talking about the culture of the company we had worked for. And we're like, it would be hard to replicate that. Like the company did such a good job, and led by the CEO and founder, right? Like he made it his mission for the culture to be great. And it was.
Yeah. I think that what you just left us with is probably the most encouraging thing, because most people listening here today, they are still that, whether CEO or, solo EO.
Yeah, exactly.
And it starts with you either way.
Yeah.
Whether you got 200 people or 2 people.
The current company I work for, Mixhalo, is great at, we find, where the pockets of folks are at, and how we can provide intentional ways for us to connect outside of work, right? And I think that's important. Not everybody needs to know everything about everybody, but the more you can personalize folks to one another, I think it just helps build that trust, as we've talked about before, and that bond, and you're in it to win it, if you will.
Yeah, I have to take this opportunity. It's such a unique opportunity because what you're talking about is putting people that are like-minded together, making them realize that they're relatable, which is when like real things happen inside of a relationship.
Yep.
Some people might hear you say vulnerability and think, well, that's the kumbaya. Well, whoa, wait a second. We're just talking about being real. We're just talking about being genuine.
Exactly.
And that doesn't always have to be about like, oh, I'm going through a marriage struggle. Like, it's just,
exactly.
Hey, I had a thought pop into my brain while we're having some dinner about this old friend that I had. And I had a fun joke that I wanted to tell you because I feel comfortable being able to say that because that's what's real. It popped in my brain. I would tell my friend, but I'm not telling you because you're my coworker, because there's like this weird thing. This happens in life, right? In all these different circles and spheres. And which is, just a half second here for the listener. This is literally why Gathering the Kings exists for entrepreneurs, because we don't necessarily have that relatable play, right? Like, okay, I have my team, yes, and I can be vulnerable and share, but not everything. Right. And I have my wife and I have my family, but like, there's just this place that only I go to.
Yeah.
In my mind, in my physical space. And it's just like, I kind of feel like I'm out here by myself.
Yeah.
And so that's exactly why, whether it's entrepreneurs or a podcast like this or a mastermind, it's just like, we've got to be able to fill ourselves with that space.
Yeah.
And half of it, when an entrepreneur, especially some of the guys and gals that are in Gathering the Kings, it's like, they realize half the struggles that they've got, the other folks in the room across the room have the same stuff. And they're like, oh my goodness, I thought I was crazy. I thought I was I thought I was the problem. Well, first off, you probably are the problem, but let's talk about how we fix it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You become relatable, or someone else like you're like, oh, wow. And that release.
Yeah.
What you're talking about in culture, it's the same thing that Gathering the Kings does for entrepreneurs. It's like this whole nother space that we can go to in authenticity, in vulnerability. Sure. But like, in relationship, to be able to operate and function at a whole nother level in our brain that you just totally shut off if you don't go there with people. Would you agree with that? Would you add anything?
No, absolutely. The only thing I would add, I think you nailed it, right? It's like, it's that release, it's that weight off of you. And I think it's also energizing, right? 100%. Like when you get around someone who gets what you're going through,
that's right.
Right? It's like, it's a game changer. It's a motivator, and again, just an energizer to keep going and know what you're doing is the right path.
Yeah. You just reminded me of something that in the last, probably, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 days, I've become obsessed. This is what we do, right? As high performing people, we become obsessed with things. And it's this concept that, that courage is caught, not taught. And so getting in a space like what we're talking about, specifically, this is what we do with Gathering the Kings. And so as an entrepreneur, you get into a space where you hear another person going through a struggle or winning at a high level. And you're like, whoa, not only is he like me, but like you said, then there's like this transfer of energy, which is courage.
Yeah.
To freaking go do it in your space. Right. Because then when you come back next week or next month, you're like, not necessarily toot my horn, but like beat my chest. That too, a little bit. Yeah. Like we want to hear yours, but it's like this whole nother sense of like, I got to show up in a completely different way. And of course that transfers out to your business, your life, your family, all of that. What would you say to that?
Yeah, no, I like that. Thinking about, catching some courage. I think that's exactly why we do the things, you just said it, why we do what we do. And it's finding your crew to give you that courage or help you, enable you to catch that courage, if you will, to keep moving forward. Because without that, it's kind of like, can be doom and gloom some days. And you're like, why am I doing this? And so, hugely important.
We didn't come this far only to come this far.
Yeah, exactly.
Need a little courage to keep going. Appreciate you clarifying that. That's such a good little drop there.
Yeah.
Hope that the listener's paying attention. I want to know, we've kind of been talking about this idea of masterminding, but my next question is pretty explicit. What do you think about it? We've just got done talking about maybe the values of it, but talk about maybe how, as an integrator, how does that work for you? Are there peer groups that you're part of? You guys do this inside of in the team even? Like, talk about that angle a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. There's all sorts of opportunities, right? And I'm very much of the quality over quantity. Coming up in my career, I think a lot of it was going to conferences, and while that can be great, right? And especially I think starting out, you can learn a lot and it's good to network, but oftentimes it would be the same content over and over again. And it would be great to see the same people, but what it wasn't developing me, if you will. And so
Right.
I think finding those groups that are more, masterminding, if you will, or
Sure.
your own peer group. So for example, I'm on the advisory council for CSUMB, California State University East Bay, and it's mainly CX leaders, but we get together regularly and we'll pose some questions, right? And so for example, one of the previous ones was around like journey mapping and whether that's an adequate tool and what do people think about it. And so it's good to hear sort of how people apply different concepts to different types of businesses, large, small, all industries. Also just hear those, varying opinions as well of, has this worked for you or not? And oftentimes you find that you can learn a lot by other people's sort of mistakes, or not even mistakes, but experiences, right? And so I think it's huge to be able to have those groups. Gathering the Kings, I think, is a similar one, right? Where you can discuss those things and learn from people and bounce things off of one another. I think the other big thing is keeping in contact with those you've crossed paths with, because you don't know when that opportunity will happen again. The world is full of crazy opportunities, and just, I like to keep those doors open, if you will, just because you never know, and you never know what opportunities may arise. And so I think
opportunities and collaboration.
It's important to, maintain. It's not like you have to be best friends and checking in with folks all the time, right? But, maintain those relationships, because I think in the long run, they are really important.
That's right. Yeah. That last little piece there, I'll hit it home for the listener from my maybe language. It's the intentionality of relationships. We've had this kind of ongoing conversation now for probably 10, 15 minutes now, but the intentionality inside of a relationship, whether it's someone that you are employing, someone that you're in partnership with, or just another peer that you're intentionally going after something together every day or every year, it depends upon the cadence. There's intentionality that goes into like I value you. And so I'm going to send a text message, or I'm going to send a birthday gift or a Christmas card, or maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's like we fly to see each other a couple times a year. Like whatever those points are, it's intentional efforts and actions that happen that keep it alive, if you will, but also flourish it. And so just hit that home. You said it perfectly. And I think that the heart behind it is actually the right posture, which is what you're sharing. So thanks. I've got one last question here for you, Allison. I want to know, if you whispered in the younger Allison's ear, what would you say?
That's a good question. I think I would say better advocate for yourself, and you don't need to be the loudest voice in the room, which I think I have learned, right? In my younger years, not saying I'm not a spitfire now, if you will, but definitely I think there was oftentimes and often situations where I just could have learned more if I wasn't so eager to, talk.
Verbal language.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, dude.
Notice how I didn't say any value,
Yeah, exactly. Like just, zip it up. Also, at the same time, I think I was of the mindset for a really long time, if I just put my head down and do my work, I'll get recognized and get what, I quote unquote deserve. And unfortunately, that is not the way things work usually. And so I think and I tell this to anyone, I work with now really, or lead, it's like, have your own accomplishments list, right? And so be able to tell the story of you. Like for me, that's the easiest way for, sort of you to get recognized, is have those data points available. And it doesn't need to be the biggest wins, but it's like, what have you done and how have you, either moved yourself forward or helped move the company forward? And so I think, telling young Allison to, chill out and keep record and advocate would probably be my message to her.
great message. In one sense, you were saying, zip it, be quiet. And the other, you were saying, speak up. And I think that both are super applicable, even to a business owner listening, because there's a lot of times where we have an ego, and that's the chatty Allison that wasn't listening, that wasn't growing, wasn't learning, whether it's ego or Spitfire, whatever you want to call it. And then the other part of it for entrepreneurs is the advocating part, which is that's your business. And I find a lot of guys, they're like me, promoting myself, I've got a guy that comes over here once a month now, and he brings all over the lights, and I get the mic, and I create content, right?
Yes.
And it's like, I'm like, the content that comes out is real. The whole thing, I'm like, do we have to do it like this?
Yeah.
And some of it is, the sharper it is, the shinier it is, the more people pay attention, so that the actual goodness of what's being delivered in a show like this or whatever can actually reach more people. But there has to be a little bit of a toot your horn perspective. There's no, like you said, just put your head down and do the work. Yeah, you got to put your head down and do the work. Like, we're not saying don't.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're a small business, and it's okay that you are excited and proud of what you're doing. I think that's probably the message.
Absolutely.
Do the same thing here, obviously. Like, even in this just one show, when I started out with this podcast, I already had the mastermind group, and the podcast was to just be able to help other entrepreneurs who maybe didn't qualify for the mastermind group.
Sure.
And the more I got to thinking about it, I'm like, why am I not talking about how awesome this mastermind group is? Like, I didn't spend the whole show talking about it, but I dropped it in a couple of times because I'm really, really excited and proud of what we're doing.
Yeah.
So I just think that what you gave is so applicable. How can the listener connect with you, find you? First off, give a little promo for the company and how we can maybe do business with you guys. But then more so for you, if they want to pick your brain around some of these integrator questions that they might have, how can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So mixhalo.com, should you want to work with us, there's ways to connect, live events, come find us. And then myself, best place is LinkedIn. I'm not much for the other socials too much. I'll dabble here and there, but LinkedIn, come find me, message me. I'm happy to connect there.
Awesome. We'll put all that in the show notes for the listeners as well.
Amazing.
Allison, you've been incredible. Thank you for just giving the time and just such an incredible story and team that you're working with over there, for them to be able to give you the rope to even share and tell a little bit about the inside. Yeah, it's very, very cool. So thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Gathering the Kings today. I hope that you were able to pull out a few nuggets to go apply into your business right away. More importantly, though, I hope that you're realizing that it takes more to be successful than just being by yourself, doing it all on your own, carrying the weight all by yourself. What I have realized, not only in my own journey from multiple businesses and multiple different industries, and now interviewing literally over 200 or 300 other very successful 7, 8, and 9-figure business owners, is that it's tough to do it alone. And so Gathering the Kings literally exists to bring together successful entrepreneurs. In fact, we are putting together 1,000 kings, specifically, who are grateful but not done. We're intentionally assembling kings who fight tooth and nail for their business, family, and communities. And here's what we believe, that in the pursuit of excellence in those areas, that it ignites within us the responsibility to govern power and forge a lasting legacy. So if that relates and resonates with you, and you know that you need people around you, sharp, qualified, other very successful business owners, I want you to go to gatheringthekings.com. I want you to take a look at what we're doing and see if it makes sense for you to be part of our pursuit to 1,000 kings. Talk soon.